My name is Sophia, and I'm 28 years old. I walked down that church aisle completely alone, not a single member of my family in sight. The beautiful bouquet in my hands shook slightly as I realized the man I'd begged to walk me down the aisle had decided I wasn't worth the 3-hour drive. My sisters had texted that morning saying my wedding to a waiter was embarrassing to our family name. I stopped halfway down the aisle, looked at my groom Daniel waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes, and made the conscious decision to smile. If my family thought I wasn't worth their time, I'd prove I didn't need their approval. The pastor asked who gives this woman, and Daniel stepped forward. "She gives herself," he said firmly, "and I'm honored to receive her." That moment changed everything about how I saw myself and my worth. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely abandoned by family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. But let me backtrack and tell you how I got to that empty church aisle. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, I was always the odd one out in the Parker family. My father, Richard, owned a successful insurance company, and my mother, Margaret, stayed home to manage our social calendar. My older sisters, Ashley and Brittany, followed the family blueprint perfectly. They married wealthy men from prominent families. Ashley married a banker 15 years older than her, while Brittany found herself a real estate mogul. Both marriages were strategic alliances that my parents approved of wholeheartedly. The expectation was clear: marry up, maintain status, never settle for less than luxury. Then there was me. At 26, I was still single, still working as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit in Chicago, still disappointing everyone with my life choices. Every family gathering involved subtle interrogations about my dating life, and not so subtle hints that I was running out of time to find an appropriate husband. "Sophia's career phase," my mother would say dismissively to her friends, as if my job helping homeless veterans was just a temporary, rebellious streak I'd outgrow. The pressure intensified when I hit 27. Family dinners became strategic meetings where my parents would casually mention eligible bachelors from good families. They arranged coffee dates with men who bored me to tears, successful accountants and lawyers who saw marriage as another business transaction. That's when I stopped going home as often. Chicago became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without constant judgment. My small apartment in Lincoln Park wasn't impressive by my family's standards, but it was mine. I loved my work, even if it didn't pay much. I was finally becoming the person I wanted to be. Little did I know that my family's disappointment in my life choices was about to get much worse. I met Daniel on a Tuesday evening at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant where I was having dinner with my college friend Lisa. Our waiter was charming, attentive, and had this incredible way of making everyone at his tables feel special. "Your waiter's cute," Lisa whispered as he refilled our water glasses. I glanced up to see warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that made my heart skip. Daniel wasn't just handsome. He had this confidence that drew you in without being arrogant. When he recommended the seafood special, his enthusiasm was infectious. "Trust me on this one," he said with a wink. "Chef Michael doesn't miss with his cioppino." He was right. The dish was incredible, and Daniel's recommendations throughout the evening were perfect. But what impressed me most was how he handled a difficult customer at another table with grace and professionalism. As we were leaving, I did something completely out of character. I left my business card with the tip, along with a note. "Thank you for making tonight special. Coffee sometime?" My phone rang the next day. Daniel's voice was even more appealing without the restaurant noise in the background. I know this might sound presumptuous, but I'm not usually asked out by beautiful women who tip well. "Well, I don't usually ask out my waiters, so we're even," I laughed. Our first date was at a small coffee shop in Wicker Park. I expected awkward small talk and realized within 10 minutes that I'd never connected with someone so effortlessly. Daniel was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly well-read. He spoke passionately about literature, travel, and his dreams of someday opening his own restaurant. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, stirring his cappuccino, "but I want to create spaces where people feel genuinely welcome. Not just fed, but cared for." That vision, combined with his genuine warmth, made me forget all about my family's expectations of appropriate suitors. Daniel made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He listened when I talked about my work with veterans, asking thoughtful questions instead of politely waiting for his turn to speak. By our third date, I was completely smitten. By our sixth, I knew I was falling in love with someone who saw me exactly as I was and loved what he found. 3 months into dating Daniel, I made the mistake of mentioning him during a family phone call. My mother's immediate question wasn't about his character or how he treated me, but about his profession. "A waiter, Sophia? Really?" The disappointment in her voice was palpable. What does he plan to do with his life? He's saving money to open his own restaurant, Mom. He's incredibly hardworking and ambitious. Ambitious waiters are still waiters, dear. What about that nice Henderson boy I mentioned? He just made partner at his father's law firm. I'd never even met the Henderson boy, but in my mother's mind, his professional success automatically made him a better match than the man who made me genuinely happy. The conversation ended with her promising to think about it when I asked if I could bring Daniel to Ashley's upcoming birthday party. She called back 2 days later. Your father and I discussed it. We think it's best if you come alone to Ashley's party. We don't want to confuse people about your relationship status. Translation: they were embarrassed by my choice and didn't want their social circle meeting someone they considered beneath our family's standards. I went to the party alone, enduring sympathetic looks from relatives who assumed I was still single and couldn't manage to find an appropriate husband. Ashley pulled me aside during dessert. Mom told me about your waiter boyfriend. Sophia, you can't be serious about this. His name is Daniel, and yes, I'm serious about him. But what's his family like? What's his background? You can't just throw away everything Dad built for us. Everything Dad built for us. As if our family's financial success somehow obligated me to marry within a certain tax bracket. I left the party early, frustrated and hurt by their inability to see past Daniel's job title. Daniel noticed my mood when I got home. Instead of pressing for details, he made us hot chocolate and put on our favorite movie. It wasn't until I was curled up against his chest that I realized something profound. This was what love actually felt like. Not the strategic partnerships my sisters had, but genuine care and comfort. My family doesn't think you're good enough for me, I said quietly. He was silent for a moment, then kissed the top of my head. Maybe I'm not, but I'm going to spend every day trying to be worthy of you. That response made me love him even more, though I didn't tell him that yet. Have you ever felt caught between your family's expectations and your own happiness? Let me know in the comments how you handled that impossible choice. 8 months later, Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to Wisconsin. We were hiking through Devil's Lake State Park when he stopped at a scenic overlook, dropped to one knee, and pulled out a simple but beautiful solitaire ring. Sophia Parker, you've changed everything about how I see my future. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me? Through tears of joy, I said yes. The ring was perfect, elegant without being ostentatious, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. As he slipped it onto my finger, I felt complete in a way I'd never experienced. The drive back to Chicago was filled with excited planning. We decided on a small ceremony in 6 months, just family and close friends. Daniel suggested Romano's for the reception, where we'd first met, which seemed wonderfully romantic. I called my parents that evening, expecting them to share our excitement. My mother's response was immediately deflating. Engaged? Sophia, are you sure you've thought this through? You barely know this young man. I've been dating him for 8 months. Mom, I know him better than Ashley knew Brad when they got engaged after 4 months. That was different. Brad's family has been in our social circle for years. We knew exactly what Ashley was getting into. My father took the phone. Sweetheart, we just want you to be practical. Have you discussed finances? Career plans? What if this restaurant dream doesn't work out? Their concerns weren't about my happiness or compatibility with Daniel, but about his earning potential and social status. I ended the call promising to bring Daniel home soon so they could get to know him properly. That visit was a disaster. Daniel drove up to Cedar Falls on a Saturday morning, nervous but determined to make a good impression. He'd bought flowers for my mother and researched my father's insurance business to find common ground for conversation. My parents were polite but cold. Every question felt like an interrogation designed to highlight Daniel's humble background. When he mentioned growing up in a single-parent household, my mother's expression showed thinly veiled disapproval. "And your mother's profession?" she asked. "She's a nurse at Methodist Hospital. She worked double shifts to put me through college." The admiration in Daniel's voice when he spoke about his mother's sacrifices was beautiful to me, but I could see my parents cataloging this information as another mark against him. Dinner was even worse. My sisters and their husbands joined us, turning the meal into a passive-aggressive showcase of appropriate relationships. Brad discussed his latest investment opportunities while Ashley nodded adoringly. Mark detailed his real estate developments while Brittany played the perfect supportive wife. Meanwhile, Daniel answered increasingly pointed questions about his long-term career aspirations and financial planning strategies with grace and honesty that made me proud and furious simultaneously. The final blow came during wedding planning. I'd naively hoped that once my family saw how serious Daniel and I were, they'd warm up to him. Instead, their resistance intensified. "We need to discuss the guest list," my mother said during a lunch meeting I'd requested to plan details. "Your father's concerned about mixing social circles." "What does that mean exactly?" "Well, Daniel's family and friends might not be comfortable with some of our guests. We don't want anyone to feel out of place." The suggestion was clear. Daniel's people weren't sophisticated enough to mingle with the Parker family social circle. When I pushed back, my mother sighed dramatically. "Sophia, we're trying to help you avoid embarrassment. A successful wedding requires careful planning, not just good intentions." "Successful wedding? Mom, it's about Daniel and me promising to love each other forever. The rest is just party planning." That's exactly the kind of naive thinking that concerns us. 2 weeks before the wedding, the situation reached a breaking point. I called to confirm transportation arrangements for my family, only to learn that none of them had actually planned to attend. "I thought we discussed this," my mother said when I called in a panic. "Your father can't take time away from the business right now, and the girls have prior commitments." "Prior commitments? It's my wedding." "Sophia, we've made our feelings clear about this marriage. We can't in good conscience celebrate a decision we believe you'll regret." I was speechless. My own family was boycotting my wedding because they disapproved of my choice in husband. The cruelty was breathtaking. But what hurt most was their certainty that they knew better than I did about my own happiness. "What about walking me down the aisle?" I asked my father directly when he took the phone. "Honey, if no one else is going, it doesn't make sense for me to drive all that way alone." "You understand." No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how the man who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with math homework could find my wedding day not worth a 3-hour drive. I didn't understand how the women who'd spent years planning their own elaborate weddings could skip mine entirely. That night, I cried in Daniel's arms until I had no tears left. He held me silently, letting me grieve the family support I desperately wanted but would never receive. "We could postpone," he offered quietly. "Give them more time to come around." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not putting my life on hold waiting for them to approve of my choices. We're getting married as planned, with or without them." And that's how I ended up walking down that aisle alone, my wedding dress trailing behind me as every step carried me away from my family's expectations and toward my new life. The small church was filled with Daniel's family and our friends, people who genuinely wanted to celebrate our love. Daniel's mother, Maria, had tears streaming down her face as she watched me approach. His sister, Rosa, gave me an encouraging nod. Our friends from Chicago cheered softly when Daniel stepped forward to meet me halfway down the aisle. The ceremony was beautiful and intimate. When the pastor asked if anyone objected to our union, the silence was peaceful, rather than tense. No one there had any doubts about our love or commitment. During our vows, Daniel promised to be the family I deserved, and I promised to build a life with him based on mutual respect rather than social expectations. When we kissed as husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in genuine joy. The reception at Romano's was perfect. Daniel's chef friend had created an incredible meal, and our friends filled the private dining room with laughter and celebration. For the first time in months, I felt completely happy and at peace with my decision. We honeymooned in Tuscany for 2 weeks, staying in small family-run hotels and eating at local restaurants where Daniel charmed the owners with his enthusiasm for their craft. He was in his element, and watching him discover new flavors and techniques filled me with excitement for our future together. It wasn't until we returned to Chicago that I learned my family had seen our wedding photos on social media. The pictures Daniel's sister had posted showed our beautiful ceremony, our glowing happiness, and most importantly, the intimate setting of Romano's. What my family didn't know was that Romano's wasn't just where we'd met and fallen in love. It was also the flagship restaurant of Castellano Restaurant Group, a company that owned over 40 establishments across the Midwest. And Daniel wasn't just a waiter who dreamed of opening his own restaurant someday. He was Daniel Castellano, heir to the family empire, who'd insisted on starting at the bottom to truly understand every aspect of the business. My phone started ringing the morning after we returned from Italy. It was my mother, and for the first time in months, her voice carried a tone I'd never heard before, panic mixed with newfound respect. "Sophia, darling, we need to talk." The woman who'd found my husband not worth attending our wedding suddenly wanted a conversation. I couldn't help but smile as I considered whether she was worth my time. The tables had turned in the most satisfying way possible, and my family was about to learn exactly what they'd missed by judging someone based on appearances rather than character. I let my mother's call go to voicemail, then the second one, and the third. Daniel watched me silence my phone with growing amusement as we unpacked our honeymoon luggage. "Aren't you curious what she wants?" he asked, folding his Italian leather jacket. Oh, I know exactly what she wants, I replied, holding up a text from Ashley that read, "Call mom immediately. Family emergency." Apparently, there's a family emergency that coincidentally started the moment they realized who you really are. Daniel laughed. That rich sound I'd fallen in love with at Romano's. Should I be insulted that they think marrying me constitutes an emergency? Only if you're insulted by people who measure worth by bank account balances, I said, finally listening to my mother's increasingly frantic voicemails. Message 1. Sophia, darling, call me back. We need to discuss some family matters. Message 2. Sophia, your father wants to speak with you about Daniel's situation. Message 3. Sophia Marie Parker Castellano, you call me back this instant. We had no idea about Daniel's background, and we need to make things right immediately. That last message made me pause. She'd used my married name for the first time, and the panic in her voice was almost amusing. Almost. They want to make things right, I told Daniel. Isn't that sweet? Now that they know you're not actually a struggling waiter, they're ready to welcome you to the family. What do you want to do? He asked, sitting beside me on our bed. I looked at my husband, this incredible man who'd worked every position in his family's restaurants to understand the business from the ground up, who'd chosen to serve tables because he believed great hospitality started with respecting every role, who'd loved me when my own family couldn't be bothered to show up for our wedding. I want to let them sweat for a while, I decided. They made their position clear when they skipped our wedding. Now they can live with the consequences. My phone rang again. This time it was my father. I should probably answer this one, I sighed. Dad only calls when he's genuinely panicked. Sophia! His voice was strained. Thank God you answered. We need to talk immediately. About what, Dad? About your husband's family business. Sophia, do you have any idea what you've stumbled into? Stumbled into. As if my marriage was some kind of accident rather than a carefully considered decision based on love and compatibility. I married the man I love, Dad. What's your point? Your husband owns Romano's. He owns 43 restaurants across 6 states. The company revenue last year was over $200 million. I could practically hear him calculating my newfound net worth through the phone. And? I prompted. And we made a terrible mistake. We should have been more welcoming. Your mother's beside herself. Now my mother was beside herself. Not when she was boycotting my wedding, but when she realized she'd miscalculated my husband's financial status. Where was this concern when I needed you to walk me down the aisle? Sophia, we didn't understand the situation. If you'd known Daniel was wealthy, you would have treated him with basic human decency. That says everything about your values, Dad. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments and let me know if you've ever had family suddenly change their tune when circumstances shifted. The next few days brought a parade of family emergencies that required my immediate attention. Brittany called with a mysterious crisis that absolutely needed my input. Ashley texted asking for Daniel's restaurant recommendations for an important client dinner. My mother left increasingly elaborate voicemails about family reunions and dinner parties that simply couldn't happen without us. I ignored them all, focusing instead on settling back into our Chicago routine. Daniel returned to work at Romano's corporate office, where I learned he spent most of his time developing new concepts and mentoring young managers. His dedication to the business was inspiring, but what impressed me most was how none of the success had gone to his head. I want to earn this, he'd told me during our engagement. My grandfather built this company from nothing. I won't dishonor that legacy by coasting on his achievements. That work ethic was exactly what my family had dismissed when they saw only a waiter taking their order. A week after our return, I finally agreed to have lunch with Ashley. She suggested meeting at Marcel's, an upscale French restaurant that happened to be owned by Castellano Restaurant Group. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ashley arrived 15 minutes late, her usual power move, but stopped short when she saw me already seated at the best table in the house with the general manager personally ensuring my water glass stayed full. Sophia, she said carefully, sliding into her seat, you look wonderful. Marriage suits you. Thank you, I replied, noting how her eyes kept darting around the elegant dining room that my husband's family had created. I wanted to apologize, she continued, for missing your wedding. The timing was just impossible with Brad's work schedule. Brad's work schedule, I repeated flatly. At First National Bank? Yes, you know how demanding his position is. What Ashley didn't know was that First National Bank was one of Castellano Restaurant Group's primary lenders. Daniel had mentioned Brad Parker's name during a recent conversation about expanding into Iowa markets. Ashley, I said gently, You do realize that your husband works very closely with my husband's company, right? Her face went pale. What do you mean? First National handles most of our restaurant financing. Brad's been trying to schedule a meeting with Daniel for months to discuss increasing our credit line. The color drained completely from Ashley's face as the implications sank in. Her husband's career advancement was now directly tied to maintaining a good relationship with the man she'd deemed unworthy of family acknowledgement. Sophia, I had no idea. We really should have been more supportive. More supportive, I echoed. Is that what we're calling it now? I know we made mistakes, but we're family. Family forgives family. That word again. Family. They'd made it clear I wasn't worth their time or effort, but now that circumstances had changed, suddenly family bonds mattered. Ashley, do you remember what you said to me at your birthday party? About not throwing away everything Dad built for us? She shifted uncomfortably. I was just concerned about your future. You were concerned about appearances. There's a difference. Can we start over? She asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Please? I didn't answer Ashley's question immediately. Instead, I watched her squirm for a moment, this sister who'd always been so confident in her superiority. The woman who'd once lectured me about appropriate marriage prospects was now literally sitting in a restaurant owned by the man she'd dismissed. Tell me something, Ashley, I said finally. What exactly do you think starting over looks like? We could be sisters again. Real sisters. You could bring Daniel to family dinners. And we could get to know him properly. The man you called an embarrassment to our family name? Sophia, please. We made a mistake. Can't you forgive us? I leaned back in my chair, considering her question. Forgiveness was one thing, but forgetting was entirely different. My family had shown me exactly who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to go home and tell Mom and Dad that Daniel and I will consider attending the next family gathering. But there will be conditions. Ashley's relief was visible. Of course, whatever you need. First, there will be no mention of our previous disagreements. No awkward apologies or explanations to other family members about why you all missed my wedding. Done. Second, Daniel will be treated with the same respect you show Brad and Mark. No condescending questions about his background or future plans. Absolutely. Third, I paused for effect. You're going to tell me exactly how Brad's promotion prospects are tied to his ability to maintain good relationships with his bank's major clients. Ashley's face crumpled. Sophia, you can't possibly... I'm not threatening anything, I said smoothly. I'm simply suggesting that Brad might want to reconsider any past comments about my husband's suitability as a family member. The power shift was complete, and we both knew it. Ashley had spent years looking down on me from her position as the successful sister who'd married well. Now she was realizing that her definition of marrying well had been embarrassingly narrow. Sophia, I'm truly sorry. We all are. Sorry that you were wrong about Daniel's financial status. Or sorry that you treated me badly. Both, she said quietly. I've been thinking about our conversation at my birthday party, and I was horrible to you. You deserved better from all of us. It was the first genuine apology I'd received from any of them, and I felt some of my anger begin to soften. Ashley had always been the most competitive of my sisters, but she'd also been the most honest when cornered. I appreciate that, I said. But Ashley, this isn't just about hurt feelings. You all made a decision about what kind of family you wanted to be. Actions have consequences. What does that mean for us going forward? I signaled for the check, noting with satisfaction that the server immediately comped our entire meal with a deferential nod. Another small reminder of how dramatically things had changed. It means that relationships are earned, not assumed, just like respect. 2 weeks later, my parents invited us to a small family dinner that turned out to include not just my sisters and their husbands, but several family friends who happened to own businesses that could benefit from connections to Castellano Restaurant Group. I should have expected it, really. My parents never did anything without calculating the potential networking opportunities. Daniel and I arrived fashionably on time to find my father holding court in the living room, regaling guests with stories about his successful daughter and her accomplished husband, the same daughter he'd been too busy to walk down the aisle just a month earlier. Sophia! My mother swept toward us with theatrical warmth. And Daniel! We're so delighted you could join us. Daniel, to his credit, accepted her embrace graciously. Thank you for including me, Mrs. Parker. Your home is beautiful. Please call me Margaret. We're family now. Family now. The irony was almost too much to bear. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. My parents had clearly briefed everyone on acceptable conversation topics. No one mentioned the wedding. My father's insurance business conveniently came up several times in relation to restaurant industry needs, and Brad spent most of the evening trying to position himself as Daniel's new best friend. "I've been following Castellanos' expansion strategy," he said over the main course. "The Iowa market seems ripe for development. We're certainly exploring opportunities," Daniel replied diplomatically. "Brad has some excellent insights about the Cedar Falls area," my father interjected. "He grew up there, knows the market intimately." I watched this pathetic attempt at leveraging family connections for business gain with growing disgust. These were the same people who'd found Daniel unworthy of their time, now trying to profit from association with him. The breaking point came during dessert when my mother suggested that Daniel might want to consider opening a Castellano location in Cedar Falls, with Brad as the local banking partner and my father handling the insurance needs. "It would be such a wonderful family collaboration," she said sweetly. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd been polite all evening, but I could see his patience wearing thin. These people had hurt his wife and were now trying to exploit their relationship for financial gain. "That's an interesting suggestion," he said carefully, "though we typically work with established partners who've proven their commitment to our values." The subtle dig hit its mark. My mother's smile faltered, and Brad's face flushed red. But the real bombshell came when Daniel continued, "Actually, we've been reviewing all our banking relationships recently. It's important that our partners share our commitment to family values and integrity." The table went dead silent. Brad looked like he was about to be sick. Ashley gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter, and my parents exchanged panicked glances. That's when I realized Daniel had been planning this moment all along. He'd been perfectly polite, letting them reveal their true motivations, before dropping the hammer. "Of course," Daniel added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we always prioritize loyalty and consistency in our business relationships. Don't we, darling?" I smiled back at my brilliant husband. "Absolutely. We believe actions speak louder than words." The ride home was quiet until we'd driven several blocks. Then Daniel and I both burst into laughter at the same time. "Did you see Brad's face when you mentioned reviewing banking relationships?" I gasped between giggles. "I thought your father was going to choke on his tiramisu," Daniel replied, still chuckling. Though I have to admit, I felt a little bad for Ashley. She seemed genuinely remorseful. Ashley's always been the most direct one. If she's apologizing, she probably means it. What about the others? I considered the question as we drove through Chicago's late-night streets. Mom and Dad are panicking because they realize they miscalculated badly. Brittany's probably trying to figure out how to leverage this for her own benefit. And Brad, well, Brad's probably updating his resume. You know, I would never actually interfere with his job because of personal issues, right? "I know," I said, squeezing his hand. "But they don't know that. And frankly, after the way they treated us, a little uncertainty seems like appropriate payback. So what's our long-term strategy here? Do we want a relationship with your family or not?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with since Ashley's lunch apology. Part of me wanted to cut them off completely, to build a life with Daniel that didn't include people who'd shown their true colors so clearly. But another part of me still remembered the good times, the family traditions that had shaped me, the possibility that people could genuinely change. "I think we give them a chance to prove they've learned something," I said finally. "But we don't make it easy for them." "What does that look like?" "Boundaries, clear expectations, and consequences when they inevitably test those boundaries." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Your family, your rules, I'll follow your lead." "Actually," I said, an idea forming, "I think it's time they learned that actions really do have consequences. Remember how you mentioned Castellano was looking for a location for the new farm-to-table concept? The sustainable dining project? Yeah, we're scouting locations in several markets. Well, Cedar Falls has been lobbying for more upscale dining options. The city council's been offering tax incentives for the right kind of development." Daniel caught on immediately. "And if we were to open there, we'd need local banking and insurance partners?" "Exactly. Partners who understand the importance of family loyalty and treating people with respect regardless of their perceived status." "You're devious," Daniel said admiringly. "I love it. They want to benefit from our success? Fine. But they're going to earn it the hard way by proving they've actually changed their values, not just their opinion of you. And if they can't prove that, then they'll learn that burning bridges has consequences. Sometimes the person you dismiss today becomes the person whose approval you need tomorrow." We pulled into our parking garage, and I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since childhood, I held all the cards in my relationship with my family. They needed something from me, and I was going to make sure they understood exactly what that meant. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. From, "Wonderful evening. Let's plan another dinner soon." I showed the message to Daniel, who shook his head in amazement. "Ready for round 2?" he asked. "Bring it on," I replied. They have no idea what they're dealing with now. 6 months later, I stood in the private dining room of Castellano Cedar Falls, watching my family navigate the most uncomfortable dinner of their lives. The restaurant's grand opening had been a massive success, and tonight's family celebration was the culmination of everything that had transpired since our wedding. Brad had spent those 6 months proving his worth as our banking partner, working overtime to demonstrate his reliability and discretion. Ashley had genuinely tried to rebuild our relationship, calling regularly and even visiting Chicago to spend time with Daniel and me without any obvious ulterior motives. My parents had been forced to compete for the insurance contract against 3 other firms, ultimately winning based on merit rather than family connections. The process had been humbling for my father, who'd never had to justify his qualifications to his own daughter before. Brittany and Mark had struggled the most with the new dynamic. Mark's real estate company had lost out on the Cedar Falls project to a firm that better understood sustainable development principles. Brittany had made several transparent attempts to position herself as our local social coordinator, all of which I'd politely declined. "This is incredible, Sophia," Ashley said, admiring the restaurant's design. "Daniel's vision is amazing." "Thank you," I replied, noting that she'd learned to include me when praising the business rather than directing all her comments to Daniel. "The sustainable farming partnerships are brilliant," Brad added. "I've been telling other clients about the model." Daniel smiled politely. "We're proud of what we've built here. It's taken a lot of hard work and cooperation from everyone involved." The emphasis on cooperation wasn't lost on anyone at the table. My mother raised her wine glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to Sophia and Daniel, and to the importance of family supporting family." I nearly choked on my drink. The audacity was breathtaking, but I'd learned to expect nothing less from her. "To family," I agreed, raising my own glass, "and to learning from our mistakes." The toast was awkward, but it marked a turning point. We'd never go back to the naive relationships of my childhood, but we'd found a new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than assumed obligation. Later, as we walked through downtown Cedar Falls, Daniel and I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. "Any regrets?" he asked, taking my hand. "About marrying you? Never. About how we handled my family? Not one. Even though it's been so complicated? Daniel, they needed to learn that love isn't conditional on social status or financial success. The fact that it took them 6 months to figure that out says everything about who they really are. And now they know that I'm not the same person who used to beg for their approval. I'm your wife, your partner, and someone who won't tolerate being treated as less than I'm worth." We paused in front of the restaurant, looking up at the elegant Castellano sign that had transformed Cedar Falls' dining scene. Inside, our families were probably still navigating the careful conversations that had become our new normal. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "What's that?" "They think this is about them finally accepting you. But really, it's about me finally accepting myself." Daniel kissed me under the streetlight, and I felt the same rush of happiness I'd experienced walking down that empty church aisle. I'd chosen love over expectation, respect over status, and authenticity over approval. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth when others can't see it. Remember that the people who truly love you will celebrate your happiness regardless of the package it comes in. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting others realize what they almost missed out on. In the end, my family didn't reject Daniel because he wasn't good enough for me. They rejected him because they weren't good enough for us. And that, as it turned out, was the most valuable lesson of all.